Hello, everybody. I'm Neil Foote, host of DBFF Soul Talk, and I am so excited today about our conversation with Chef Tiffany Derry. Now, I'm not going to say a whole lot about her bio because we're going to get into some of these details. But if you don't know who Chef Tiffany Derry is, she is the founder of Tiffany Derry Concepts, the co-founder of T2D Concepts. She's a wonderful chef. If any of you out there watch Top Chef, then you have seen Chef Derry, and any of you in the DFW area, you probably, if you haven't yet, checked out her restaurants over the last few years. You know, she has this wonderful career that we're going to talk about that started at the age of 15, but truly inspired by her family. Her cuisine captures some of that Southern flair, but a sophistication and a flavor palette that just makes you want to come back for more. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about her journey into becoming a chef, her adventures of being a TV chef, and some of her latest adventures about creating these wonderful cultural experiences through food. Let's welcome Tiffany Derry.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, Chef Derry, it's been great to reconnect and see you and really follow you from afar. Not only just watching on the tube, but streaming and so congratulations on all your wonderful work. And I know we'll get into some of that in our conversation today. And thanks for joining, Denton Black Film Festival. Where it's all about experiencing culture and for what you are doing with your restaurants and your food. I think you really bring all of that to the table for our audience today. And pardon the bad pun, but let's set the table, right? Because, right? And you talk so much about the influence of your family on your food, on how it influenced your food. So talk about how in Beaumont, Texas, this little girl surrounded by family. What does a Sunday dinner at the Derry household look like? Girl, take us back to those days.
Oh, well, I think it's important to know that my grandmother had 11 children. So we weren't quite at the table, but we was at a table.
Right.
So we would, everyone would cook. A lot of my family cooked. So I came from a family of very strong cooks. And I mean, uncles that baked and did pastries, and everyone had a role because guess what? It was 11 of them, and she did not cook every night. So my mom, who is sort of to me, the best cook of the family, don't let them know I said that. But she was a little different. She not only cooked Southern food, but she cooked other types of food. So she would taste something and then she would come back home and recreate it. My mom does hair. So one of the ladies at the shop would make like menudo, and she would come home and she'd say, I had this menudo and I want y'all to try it. So we cook it and eat. And so that was sort of how I grew up, with a strong sense of Southern, but also open to different types of foods. And so a family table would look like Thanksgiving. My friends and family, they always laugh because if anyone came to my house who wasn't familiar, which meant either my grandmother's house or my aunt's house, we all got together a lot. We ate a lot of food, and there was a lot of food at the table. And so to me, culinary and food, just bringing people to the table is something that I have enjoyed in my life, and I wanted to pass that on for others to be able to enjoy as well.
Well, it sounds like that experience influenced the palette that you kind of created here. I mean, so how did that develop your philosophy here? You said, you like to experiment with taste, but what was that, again, these ranges of food across the table and throughout your life? How has that influenced your philosophy about food and your approach to what you serve so many customers these days?
Yeah, so my family is from Baton Rouge and Port Allen, Louisiana. And so when they moved over to Beaumont, they still brought that Louisiana flavor, right? I mean, we're just as country and Southern as we get. And so I learned to love many things. And as I grew up, going to culinary school, we experienced so many different types of cuisine. I worked at International House of Pancakes at the age of 15. And so I got into the restaurant business earlier than a lot of other chefs that I know. And it was just an opportunity to grow. So fast forward, maybe in college, I went to the Art Institute of Houston, and there was a trip that was coming up, and they were going to France. And in my
Ooh.
world, like, French food was considered the absolute best. It's what you aspire to do. And so I pulled out my pennies together, and my family helped, and I took my first trip international, went to France for a few weeks, and had a life-changing moment. It was also the moment where I realized I want to get away. I want to experience the world. I only know Southern food. And as wonderful as that is, I want to know more. And so in that moment, I made a vow to myself to get out of the country at least once a year. And I've held true to that now for 24 years. So where that trip is entirely about food. It's not about just the vacation. I I take cooking classes, I study, I eat a lot, I get with somebody's grandma, and just have that experience to really be able to identify. And what I found, Neil, was that though we have different ways of doing things, for instance, in Korea, they do a lot of fermentation, right? So they have kimchi. The kimchi reminded me, not in flavor, but in technique, of like how my granny would preserve things, right? How she would take and
Mhm.
preserve in mason jars, how she would pickle things. And so what I found is that even though we may be worlds and water apart, we are very, very close when we look at it through food.
Which I think is kind of interesting because we're seeing this evolution even of cooking shows, right, that are not so much even focused on the recipe and the meals,
Sure.
right, but the culture of the food. And I know my daughter has introduced me to so many different cooking shows because she loves these that really get into, just as you're doing, going into these communities and understanding the culture and finding out what that local fare is. And I think that's been so fascinating. Particularly understanding that how food and culture and economy and entrepreneurs all around the world are engaged in this business. Is there one place in the world that has really left a lasting impression with you?
Yes. I mean, I love Thai food. I love Thailand.
Mm.
I've been to Thailand about, I guess, 5 or 6 times, and I just can't get over it. I mean, every time I go, I experience a different flavor profile that I'm used to. So it's almost an explosion
Mm.
in my mouth. I'm like, yes, bring me all the Thai food. So yeah, Thailand has definitely been pretty cool. When I look at like traveling north and being more in nature and being able to be outside and just enjoying the forest and all the other different areas, and then going to the city, it's nice. And then making your way down south, even more so where the beaches are, where the food is very much seafood driven. It's nice. But the truth of it all is, for many years, I ran away from sort of the cooking that we did at home because I didn't want to be classified as the chef that only did soul food or only did
Mm.
Southern food. And growing up, you know, I was almost taught that Southern was less than, right? I mean, I would go to a place and they'd say, oh, you're a chef. Oh, you cook soul food. Oh, you cook Southern food. And I wanted to be so much more than that. But what I found out was I just didn't know enough. And so now that I have traveled the world, now that I understand my history a little bit more, and I'm so proud of all of my family roots and all the people who came before us, and the food and the part that they played in making America who they are, through food. And so I think that now I just want to tell that story. So that is the story that I tell through food, through Roots Chicken Shack and Roots Southern Table.
And I think that's so interesting because I think it goes to this 15-year-old teenager going into that IHOP to want to just do what you want to do, and
Right.
that didn't quite work out the way you thought it would. Tell folks what happened when you went into that IHOP as an innocent, eager
Yeah,
young
look, an
girl. Just
innocent young Tiff. Yes,
yeah.
excited. First job. I want to be a cook.
Mhm.
Went in and the manager told me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a cook. And he said that no women cooks are allowed in our kitchen. We don't do women in the kitchen. And I was like, wait, what? And he was like, yeah, you can be a server. And, young naive Tip was like, oh, okay, well, I'll take a server, whatever position you have. And I really didn't understand it. And I had a couple of run-ins while I was there, where people weren't very kind. Had a very racist moment with a guest, and I learned some lessons. Perhaps I was a little sheltered growing up, and the restaurant business sort of showed me that everybody's not the
Mhm.
same. But what I didn't do was allow that to change how I look at the world and what I could do. Right. So you always have a lot of people that feel like they put their fears on you. You can't do this, you can't do that. My grandmother, she was so nervous for me to go into the industry. She said, baby, I think you should be in front of somebody's camera, not slaving away in the kitchen. And I said, well, Grandma, it's not like that. It's not like that anymore. I understand where you came from. And recently she told me, she said, wow, you're doing things that I could have never imagined. And just that proud, grandmother, loving touch. And so we can't allow those things to hold us back. Everyone always has something to say.
Particularly nowadays, right? The no tongues are being held back at all, which is so profound by your grandmother, right? She saw something in you that really ended up playing out about your love of food and cooking and culture. And so how does this young girl who's serving tables and get on Top Chef? What was that ride like to suddenly get that call?
Yeah, you know what? It still feels like yesterday in a way, and in many ways, miles away. I was at a restaurant called Go Fish. I was executive chef there, and it was in by the Galleria area here in Dallas. And I was just cooking away like I normally do, operating the restaurant. And my host came up and said, hey, Chef, you have a phone call. And I said, well, okay, well, tell him I'll call him back because obviously I'm in the middle of the rush and there's people outside waiting for their food. I'm not going to be on the phone talking. And she's like, no, 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 you need to answer this. And I was like, who is it? She's like, it's Top Chef. And I'm like, I bet it is. Top Chef calling me. And she's like, no, it is. So I get the phone a little annoyed because I really think someone's playing a joke on me. And so I'm like, hello, and they're like, hi, this is Magical Elves, the producer of Top Chef. And I was like, well, hello, and so that was sort of how it started. I initially said I wasn't interested because I didn't want to do drama. I didn't want to live with people. And they were like, but you can win $125,000. And I was like, where you sign me up at?
I can cook, I can be on TV and make some money. I'm in.
Yeah.
Wow. So you get were you in Beaumont? Well, you were here in Dallas. So getting to New York, how? Yeah, I remember watching that season. We were glued to you, cheering you along all every step of the way. What did you learn from that experience? What was it like? Did it make sense to you at the time? Was it, tell us, take us on what shooting that must have been like.
Yeah, I'll never forget. Right before I got the final word, they had one more interview, and I went into this room, and it's this really large room, and they have me stand up, and everyone else is sitting down. It's like 6 people there at this long table, and each of them are firing off questions. And I remember Andy Cohen in the very center of the room. And, I just was like, oh my gosh. And the person who was prepping me for going in the room, like, just be yourself. I'm like, okay. And so I was like, is this what I'm about to get into? Like, so I was a little bit nervous during that period of time, but it worked out well. I get to the house and here I am with, I think it was 15 other people. And again, never lived with people. And I remember going, these people are so arrogant because all they did was talked about themselves. And so, at this moment, I'm more quiet, right? Because I don't know them. I don't really feel comfortable. I'm nervous, all of these things. And we do our first challenge. And it's on the roof of one of the hottest days in DC. And it's like cutting the chicken, cutting onions, and it's a speed challenge. And so one of the things that I'm good at is I'm fast. And so coming from IHOP, you had to be quick at everything. It's called a short order cook. And so I did the challenge, and I remember like half of them got eliminated in the first round. I'm like, all right, let's go, So there's that first challenge. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm okay, right? And so we do the second one, and then it narrows it down. And then we do another round, and I'm still in there. I'm super excited. But it just sort of made me think, okay, you should be here, right? Like, this is for you. The whole show itself was a mix of emotions. One day you're doing great. One day they don't even really notice you. You're like, wait, I'm in the middle, and middle was frustrating me. But at the end of the day, I learned some life lessons. One is the confidence that comes when you've competed on a level with very talented people where you're continually having to create on a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, and adapting where millions are watching you. I didn't understand sort of what I would get out of Top Chef when I went on, because it wasn't my world. I didn't have anybody to talk to ask those questions, right? And afterwards, it was like once that one episode came on, life was different. Things were different. It was, I went from just cooking at a restaurant, enjoying it, to now, everyone's a critic, and so many more are coming in, and people know your name and your family and your son's name, and you're like, this is weird. But then I learned, that, hey, you just go with it.
Obviously, just go with it. I mean, did you, in that competition, did you feel it helped your cooking at all? Or was it, I'm sure that, even as we look at the Olympics and others, we talk about the best competitors saying they're driven by the others. Was that the same in cooking?
100%. I mean, I sort of came into my own. You come on the show and, you cook a lot. So I'm there for, I guess, about 4 or 5 weeks, and you cook every day. Some days you cook twice. So you have sort of in your bag a couple of things you feel like you can do. So when you go on this show, you can't bring recipes, which is why we all hate the baking and pastry challenges, because it needs to be perfectly, measured. And we don't have any recipes with us. So you only have what you have in your head. So, you get in and you're writing stuff and you're figuring it out. And, you make a few dishes you've made before. But once you're like halfway through, you're like, okay, I need some new tricks, right? And so you start to sort of develop who you are, your cooking style, and especially if you're listening to the judges, which, I heard them well. It was like, okay, show me more. Who are you through food? I want to see that, right? Cook every meal like it's your last meal. And so there's a different strength that comes from it. And you just develop into something stronger than when you went in, and the confidence must grow, so you're just a little different.
There you go. So you do this TV show and you come back here to Texas, and life changes very quickly. How do you go from chef to saying, well, I think I want to run my own restaurant? How did that connection take place? Did the TV show finally put you exposure in front of some people? Why did you even want to run your own restaurant? I'm sure there are that's probably another episode we can go into that, but let's just talk about that transition from being a chef on this wonderfully popular show, which was huge at the time, to then coming into, running a business. And the business of food is a lot different than coming up with, a nice tasting plate every day.
Right. You're right. I sort of was pushed in this direction. So I had left and went on season 7 of Top Chef and ended up winning fan favorite and making it down to top 5. Came back home and I got a call. Wasn't even home a week, and they were like, "Can you come back and do season 8?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "It's the first time we're going to do an all-star season, so we want to bring in sort of the creme de la creme of every season." So I'm like, "Wow, I don't know if I want to go back." But of course
Mhm.
you go back, right? And so I went back. I don't think I was home for 3 weeks. So here we are, another, 6 weeks, 5, 6 weeks of filming again. And come back home after all of that, went down to top 4 in the final, and it was great. People now, the show is on TV. People know who I am. My restaurant that I'm working at is getting great publicity. And then one day, I'm in the restaurant and a group of guys are gathered outside, and I found out that the owner was closing the restaurant.
Oh.
And it was a very much life-changing situation for me because everyone was looking to me on what to do, right? Like all of these people
Mhm.
worked with me, and I was the face of the brand. And I felt humiliated because here I am on TV, right? Here I am, top chef contestant, chef. And, there's news saying
Mm.
her restaurant can't make it, or, she can only cook on TV. She can't operate a restaurant. And here I am, I have no say so in it, right? I've become the
Wow.
brand. I'm the face, yet I make no decisions on what happens, on where our money goes, on all of these different things. And so one of my cooks said, he was like, "Chef, what do I do? I, what do I do?"
Yeah.
And it just shook me. It shook me in a way that pushed me to never work for someone else again. I said, from
Mhm.
now on, I will make the decisions. Whether they are good or bad, I will face them because I did not like being put in a situation and just having to take it when I had no say so. And so that was sort of what pushed me to get into ownership. And
Mhm.
I knew the things that needed to happen. I just couldn't always make them happen because I didn't write the checks. And who writes the check holds the power. And
Mhm.
so that was sort of the lesson that I learned and took into my own company, TD Concepts.
Right. And you've had all sorts of success with that, and really have used it as, certainly to test and try out various concepts. You talk about some of I want to get into some of the other industry related stuff you're doing, but I want to make sure we talk about the wonderful, concepts that you have working now that our listeners should learn about. So you've
Yeah.
got Roots Chicken Shack for one, and then you just opened a new restaurant as well.
Yeah, so we have Roots Chicken Shack. We're inside of Legacy Hall, which is in Plano, Texas. And then we also have a Roots Chicken Shack in Austin. I partnered with HEB. And so we are inside of Austin location. And then just 5 weeks ago, I opened Roots Southern Table, which is more of a full restaurant. The others are smaller in a footprint, a limited menu, chicken sandwiches, chicken wings, chicken strips. They're all fried in duck fat, which makes it even more crispy and delicious. And there are some little, pieces of my mother's banana pudding on the menu, sweet tea Kool-Aid.
Mm.
And then Southern Table is really sort of my homage to my family, to my roots.
Mhm.
It's very different. We have a part of our menu that we call down home roots, and that's where you'll have cornbread that we do with like a strawberry rhubarb preserve we make in house, and we smoke the butter, and you see all of that cast iron going to your table. My mother's gumbo is on
Mm.
the menu as well, and then we have what I call my modern roots. So peaches that are from a very specific, beautiful Cooper's Farm, slices of prosciutto, mint, pecans, things that grow together tend to do well on the plate as far as flavor combinations as well. And so we have a play on things using fresh farm vegetables, knowing where our meat and seafood comes from, knowing that we can track it down and it's all about quality and telling the story of our Southern roots through the hands of the people who made the food. And so when I really think about Southern cuisine, I don't think of it as a one-dimensional. I don't think of it as a in-the-box type of thing. A lot of people say Southern food is more about the dishes, and that's because of the lack of knowing about our roots. And so within the restaurant, I show that there's a lot of people, a lot of cultures that actually make up Southern cuisine. If we use, for an example, of Louisiana, and you think about New Orleans and who has settled there, and I say who stirs the pot, right? You know, Vietnamese, one of the largest, second largest community in the U.S. And then you have the Germans who really helped define sort of what andouille sausage is and the sausage of what we love about Southern cuisine. The Spaniards that were there, the French, the Creole, the Africans, like they created the Southern cuisine that we enjoy. And so when I look at it from their lens, there is so many ways I can go to represent the foods that I grew up eating. And so those are the stories that we tell the Roots Southern table.
Yeah, I was looking at the menu and it looks fascinating. So I'll have to check it out for sure. And you mentioned a couple of things that really run through a lot of your philosophy of food about it being, farm raised and resourced. And this is kind of translated to something about sustainable foods that you really have become actually an ambassador to the world in this area. Talk about this honor that you have of ambassador of what's ambassador for food waste for the James Beard Foundation. I think that's just, to me, goes to your care about what you're doing in cooking the food, but also sourcing the food, which to me clearly implies and influences the way you run your business. How do these all come together, and what's your role, and how does that? What do you do for that in that role?
Yeah, a lot of times when people thought of Southern food, they thought of cheap. And that's just not true. When I think about my great grandparents and even my grandparents, they had farms. They were doing farm to table before farm to table was a thing, right?
Right.
And so I see so many of us that are living with so many conditions strictly, and a lot of it is because of the choices of food or access to food that we have. And so I knew that I wanted to advocate not only for those who can't advocate for themselves, but for just a better food system altogether. And we were talking one day, and I was talking with James Beard, and we were all talking about food waste and how large of a problem it is, especially in the US. And so we started doing some research, working with other companies, and they asked me if I would be the ambassador for food waste. I wrote a cookbook, and I work a lot with the embassy. So I'm also ambassador for the United States. So I go to other countries and I talk about Southern roots. I talk about entrepreneurship and the business of culinary with other countries. So last year I went to France, I went to Vietnam. The year before we went to India. And so I host events, dinners. I do a lot of visits to culinary schools or colleges all across the world, just trying to showcase what we do here, because a lot of it is not what they think, right? When they think of us, they literally think of hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, And so sometimes when I do the dinners, they're like, "This is American?" I'm like, "Yes, it is," And so, especially in France, they were like, "This is not American food." Like, okay, it's so much different than what they thought. And so I was just able to shine a light and really just sort of work with people who are already doing the work. James Beard has a crazy arm in the industry of really coming about change, progress, and advocating for a better food system, and showing, especially giving the chefs a chance to be able to use their voice and not just get in the kitchen and cook.
Yeah, that's just kind of fascinating, Tiffany. So that's a long way from Beaumont.
Yes, it is.
What's Grandmama have to say now? What does she say when you tell these stories that, hey, Grandma, I cooked for people in France and Vietnam, and what does she say now?
She has always been super excited. I remember the first time I was invited to the White House under the Obama administration,
Hmm.
and I cooked, and that, like, for her, life. You know what I mean? She was like, never in my years, And so she was just so excited to see it. And then when I told her I was going back again, she was like, wow. And so it was just things like that, to be able to cook for people who are doing amazing things for us or represent something bigger for us. And so my grandmother, whenever she sees, me traveling or doing, she's just so proud.
Of course, we all are. We all are. Which is, your humility is just wonderful. You just kind of casually talk about James Beard and, oh yeah, I cooked for the Obamas. So what did you cook for the Obamas? That's what we want to know.
So the first time, it was course. So the first time was gumbo. As a first, I don't remember the salad, but I know that it was an event, and it was for some officials. I don't know who. And so I cooked in the kitchen in the White House. And so that was
Mm.
amazing. I was so nervous. You have to get officially picked up, and there's so many things that go into, the behind the scenes of you visiting. And so I remember we were walking, and you could take a few pictures. And so I got ready to sit my bag down just to get a good picture. And here they come. you know
Really? I'm just taking the picture. It's just little
They're
old
like, don't
me.
set anything down. Yes, you don't have to worry. Just get me to the kitchen. And so that was sort of the first. And we did fried chicken. I know for sure we did the duck fat fried chicken.
Hmm.
And then we did like this beautiful vegetarian dish with just different seasonal vegetables from the garden. And then we did a fish dish. I'm pretty sure it was sea bass and some beautiful risotto. And it was one of the first. So the president doesn't always eat from anyone who's cooking. So they have a certain person who typically will cook for them, right? And so
Hmm. Mm.
um, one of the guys was like, he's gonna eat, And so this became a big deal. And I was like, oh wait, should I, do something different? They're like, no, just letting you know he's gonna eat. Now here comes Secret Service, and they're looking at me plate the food. And so this and then one of the guys, he was so sweet, he sent me a picture of the plate when it was done to let me know
Oh,
that all of it was gone. And so it was a big deal that day. They're like, he never eats from. So I was like,
oh,
okay.
how exciting! How exciting! Which, goes to kind of I think role model is overused sometimes, but because I think someone like you're doing what you do because you love what you do, which is something my dad always reminded me. I don't know how many times, it probably wasn't a day, particularly as I got older, in my adult life. He said, yeah, Candace, you need to enjoy what you do. You enjoy what you do, don't you?
I do. I love it. I love it every day. There are obviously days that are has a few mountains, but
Mm,
it's, when you work in an industry that so many things are forever changing, and then you get into that ownership, right? And so now no longer do I just worry about making good food. There's a lot of other things that go
mhm,
through from day to day. And I was laughing the other day. I woke up and it was like 7 a.m. and I already had 6 messages about, your order's not coming in. Now we're having problems with the food system. We're having getting product. Prices are surging. Chicken is up. All of a sudden, there's a ketchup shortage. You're like, what is going on? And it's all of the things behind the scene that people just don't know, right? Price of food is
mm,
dramatically increasing, and that's a little
mhm,
scary. Things that you would be able to get with no problem, you're having to figure it out. And so there's a lot, that I think we can do to educate everyone on what's happening and how things are changing. Maybe they'll go back to normal, maybe they won't. A lot of like processing plants are operating at 50% capacity. So one day you have something, the next day you don't. And
mm.
so hopefully giving the restaurants grace when they go in and they're out of things.
Yes, which, this past, the pandemic has caused havoc for all sorts of things. And you kind of just mentioned some of the issues. What did you do to try to survive? Particularly, here it is, you encountered that horrible feeling of the investors saying this is the last day, and now here it is, you have this year of just challenges of how do you keep your labor. What did you do this past year, and what lessons have you learned moving forward?
When everything was coming about with the pandemic, and there was so much talk about restaurants closing or having to close, and dining room closing, and I could feel the tension from all my employees at the time, who were all trying to figure out what they can do, and the same feeling that I had when the restaurant closed on me came back, and I could feel it, and I instantly went to work. I said, you know what, we're not going to go down. This is not the end. I just reassured all of my employees that we're going to fight. We're going to figure it out. We're smart people, and we'll do it. So, it took some time for us to adjust. We adjusted with doing a smaller menu. We adjusted with starting to do family meals, and family meals really saved us. We prepared meals for a family of 4 at a great price, and just took advantage of whatever people were selling in bulk. So if I had, tons of turnips, guess what? We were having turnips on the menu today. And we sold it at a great price when a lot of people were doing very expensive meals. And one of my philosophies was, if we just take care of our community, I really believed that our community would take care of us. So we needed to give them wholesome food, because people were not able to get wholesome food.
Yes.
You can always find cheap food, right? You can find cheap, but what that does for you in the long run does not help your body, doesn't help you. And so we created meals that gave people comfort in a way that they weren't able to get. On certain days we just do red beans and rice, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, just to have that. And then, we always had a salad. We always had a little sweet tooth. And there were days we threw in a bottle of wine. And so it was, something that everyone could have at a great price. And they just kept coming back for.
Do you think you and other restaurateurs will what lessons have you taken from this that you'll continue to move forward doing, pandemic or otherwise?
We have to adjust. We have to learn to adjust to whatever the situation is, and do it okay, right? Like, I can make a plan. It may not be exactly what I want, but you know what? We're going to figure out along the way. We're not going to just keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And so for me, pandemic has definitely learned, I've learned to adjust and to give it my all. And, it'll be all right. We just have to make sure that we do it wholeheartedly. And we have to remember why we're doing the things that we're doing.
Yeah, well, the why is so important. I think more so than ever, given that things can change in a minute, seemingly, right? These days,
Yes.
cross our fingers all the way along. You give a lot. You work hard. You give a lot. What about some advice? What advice do you have for the everyday chef like myself and others out there who? The interesting thing is, my mom did the kind of day-to-day cooking, but when it came to the holiday cooking, my dad was the big Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and Easter, and then my aunt loved to cook, and you would have fallen in love with her because she had gourmet magazines bound in shelves of cookbooks that when she died, I didn't have a big enough house and enough shelf space to them. And still in my shelf today, I have this, my uncle had Xeroxed all these recipes and gave me a binder when I was going off on my own. So what advice do you have for that everyday chef to keep things interesting and approaches to buying food and produce, and mixing the palate up, because we get in ruts, I some days I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And I almost, my wife laughs at me because it's kind of like a Top Chef challenge. It's like, let's see, what do I have in the fridge? What can I make?
Yes, I had one of them today.
what can I make today that will be interesting because I don't want to go to the store. So,
Yes.
any advice to us everyday cooks?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely buy as local as you can. Buying local helps not only for you, but it helps the environment. It helps socially. It just helps so many people. And I don't think sometimes we grasp that just buying a
Mm,
local Texas tomato makes an impact for everyone, right? And so if you
mm,
can buy local, there are things that we can't buy local, and that's okay. But try to make an effort in that. Organic doesn't always mean what you think it means, so I will
mm,
always go more for the local than I will just because something reads organic. The other thing is keep it interesting. If you realize that you are eating the same thing every week after week, try opening up Google, looking up some other dishes that you love. Let's say chicken, let's say
yeah.
fish. Try a new recipe. A lot of times it will really
Hmm.
surprise you. And I say, if you see something in the market that you've never heard of, you've never used, pick it one day out of the week. Just pick it, do a little research on it, and cook it. It might end up being your new favorite dish.
Yeah, well, and I've been trying to do that, Tiffany. I'm like, okay, I know, I do my list, but then I'm like, I get the usual stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try this and figure it out. So that's fun. And for those aspiring chefs, the folks who they hear your story today about that 15-year-old kid who's like, oh, I just want to cook, and what do whether I'm 15 or I'm old now, but for those who were thinking about careers in the culinary, what steps should they be thinking about? What should they learn as if they're a kid now, and or even in college and thinking about a career of being in the food business?
I mean, wherever you start, just start somewhere, right? Mine was at IHOP. It could be a fast food place. It doesn't matter the start. No one cares about the start. It's the finish, right? So whatever you
Hmm.
learn, you take with you. And so I tell my cooks this all the time. I say, no one can ever fire you from your talent, right? Like they can't take that from you.
Mm.
So whatever you learn is for you, and you use that everywhere you go. So learn as much as you can, eat as much different types of cuisines as you can, and get in a restaurant that you feel proud of. So at some point, you're going to have to work in a restaurant, period. If you want to be a chef, at some point you have to work in a restaurant. You will not learn everything you need to do on your own. You'll have to see how things are done, adjust a little bit. And if you decide to not go restaurant route, it's definitely okay. But at some given point in your life, you need to do it. You need to get speed. You need to see how things run efficiently, because learning on your own is different than obviously learning from someone who's spent many years doing it. So, give it a try if you want to do it. First, before you go spend all your money on culinary school, thinking that you enjoy cooking at your home, I suggest you go work in a restaurant for a day or two. Ask, can you just come in and for free, and you'll be there for the day, right? Like just to get some type of
Mm.
exposure to the industry, because it's not always what people think it is. It's not just over there cooking away, having a great day cooking. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, and how is that different than a catering business? Because I know folks who have catering businesses. Same
Sure.
philosophy there of understanding food, and to
Yes.
me there are other standards to that as well.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, even if you're going to go into the catering route, you still most likely have worked in a restaurant, understanding the process of prepping things. Even if you say, I want to be a caterer, I want to be a personal chef. Getting with a catering company that does high volume is important. The reason I keep saying restaurant is because you're going to learn on volume. And when you're sometimes personal chef, you do, a couple, you may do 4 to 6 plates, but there's going to come a moment where you're going to want to make more money. And the more money comes with doing the bulk of items, right? Like a wedding versus,
Yeah.
cooking for someone in their home for 4 people. So there's some experience that you need that you don't quite have yet. And you really don't know you don't have it until you get put into the situation. And so being a part of whether a large catering or being a part of restaurant helps you to organize yourself, the menu. Also will show you other types of things that maybe you aren't as familiar with different types of cuisine.
Yeah, that's good. You've developed so much confidence over these years to and overcome so many challenges. For those who are concerned about the racism and sexism in the industry, I want to come back to how you overcame that, how you continually probably have to deal with this notion that unfortunately as Black folks in this world, we constantly seemingly have to prove ourselves. But what continues to drive you? What advice and counsel can you have to us, and how you've kind of pushed through that to succeed as you have today?
I look at myself and say, what do you want? What do you want, Tiff? And I wrote it down and I constantly work on it. I had to learn to block out the noise. I had to learn to block out every comment and every social media post. I remember the first time I was on Top Chef, someone said they didn't like me because they didn't like my laugh. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? And those things would hurt my feelings so bad. But what I learned is along the way, there's a lot of people who will say things, they will do things. Because I'm a woman, because I'm Black, because I don't cook the food that they feel is the best food. And I have to learn to just block that out and not allow what people say about me to keep me from where I'm supposed to be, because I put myself at a place where what's for me is for me. And I just prepare myself as much as I can to get to where I want to get to, because I know that there are times when we take on things that we're not ready for. And so what I don't want to do is get to a place in life where I'm ready in my head for something, but I haven't done everything that I can do to prepare myself, right? I haven't taken the courses. I haven't studied. I haven't put the time in. And so when the opportunity presents itself, I want to be ready for it. The restaurants I have right now, one of them I waited 7 years for. I've been working and finding the location and coming up with a concept. And there's a lot of things that, you have to do to prepare yourself for those big moments. But trust and believe that with every big moment comes a whole bunch of no's and a whole bunch of some failure in ways. But it's just figuring out how do you take that and grow from it, right? And so for me, I just had to learn to be okay with stepping out and okay with making a mistake, but figuring out what do I do from there. And I'm a planner by nature, so for me, a lot of it is a lot of planning, and then from there, execute.
That's wonderful advice. So let me end on a note. We started out at your family's table back in Beaumont as a kid. So I want to fast forward to today. So if I happen to ring your doorbell around 6 p.m., what's Chef Derry cooking up for herself on any night?
You don't want to come here at 6 p.m. I'm at the restaurant now.
You say, good luck. You say, meet me at the restaurant. Okay, well, good to know. Good to know.
Yes, come on over to Roots Southern Table.
There you go. I love it. Do you, when you're cooking for yourself, are there favorite foods you like to whip up?
Yes, I love rice, and everyone makes fun of me because you can eat rice every day, and I'm like, I do eat rice every day. And so, growing up in Beaumont, we also had rice farms, so rice was just one of those things. And my grandmother used rice apparently to stretch the meal, but now I just love rice. So, in the morning, I may do a little bit of bacon, egg, and rice, and you will always find a 50-pound bag of rice at my house, and I do need 50. And so you'll find that I even like, rice pudding. I do rice for dessert. Anything that you can imagine, I can eat it with rice. But I don't know, I'm pretty simple when it comes to my own meals, just because most of the time it's less time. I'm just trying to get something quickly.
There you go. Well, we've been with Chef Tiffany Derry. Remind folks the names of your restaurants and how we can follow you on social.
Yes. So one of my restaurant concepts is Roots Chicken Shack. It's in Plano and Shops of Legacy, or in the Mueller area inside Austin, Texas. Roots Southern Table is in Farmers Branch, and you can find all of them through the website, through social media. Myself followed at Instagram at Master Chef Tiffany Derry, or TiffanyDerryConcepts.com, where you can find everything about all the restaurants and all that I have going on.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Chef Derry. I think you've proven that if you have dreams, you should stick to them, to focus on what you want. I love what you say there, that despite all the noise, ultimately it's what you want, and how you keep focused on that despite the noise. You can push yourself through, understanding that there'll be challenges and bumps along the way, but just keep your eyes focused on that. I also love the fact that culture is so much a part of what you do with your restaurants and your food, and this notion of shopping local, of being conscious of how foods and helping your local farmers. And the fun concept that farm to table is an age-old tradition that now is the trendiest thing around, that you are a part of, that you really know from your own personal experience is so important to it. So we from the Denton Black Film Festival wish you best of luck. Thank you for joining us for the DBFF Soul Talk. This has been a wonderful conversation, and don't be surprised if you see a bunch of us showing up at the restaurant one night. So hope we'll see you there. We'll be there. We'll be there. Thank you, Chef Derry.
Thank you.